Alright, I'm Soular and we are in the Solar System, and I'm going to take you through the production of my track Intelligence Explosion. So this track was inspired by one of my favorite tracks by Original Sin called Dr. Feels Good, and it's what inspired this little simple melody but nevertheless kind of euphoric and uplifting. It goes like this. So yeah, we have that melody, and one thing I did specially for that one, something I picked up from a YouTube tutorial, was I added a little bit of white noise to it, because white noise helps you cut through the mix with your synths. So I had this envelope, really short attack, sort of a midway release, and I mapped it to the amp on the noise unit. Push the color all the way up, put it on white, and you don't want the amp to be too high because when you're producing it, it might not sound that loud, but on a big system, it can get really staticky really quickly. So just a little bit of amp on the white noise and it cuts through the mix really nicely, and another thing I love to do when I produce is to color code. Color coding keeps you organized, and I always recommend everybody to do it. I can't stand when everything is gray and hard to navigate, and plus it helps when you go back to tunes too, because when you go back to it months later, if you want to tweak something or work on it a little bit, maybe do a VIP or a remix, it's terrible when you can't navigate and when you can't read stuff. When it comes to making drops, I always like to have a lot of swishies, a lot of rising effects like these. A lot of rising. So yeah, a lot of risers, a lot of anticipation building effects, and of course your trademark typical bass drum roll. I have a low pass filter on that. Gotta love the wow filter for that by Sugar Bites. Best filter I've ever used. One thing that I learned very much making this track is juxtaposing synth and bass sounds, because during drop sections you don't want to just have one or two sounds going on. It definitely helps when you have a lot of different kinds of sounds going on, but delving deeper into that, some people just have a lot of bass sounds. Like a lot of dubstep and drumstep artists, they have like a million different mid-range bass sounds without anything else, and I like to alternate synthy sounds with bass sounds, and that's what I did on this track. Like you have the bass and you have the synth at the end of the 8-bar count. Yeah, I love juxtaposing bass sounds and synth sounds because it juxtaposes the dark heaviness with the light uplifting elements. And when it comes to percussion, I love just chopping up different loops. Like I have these 3 loops going throughout most of the drop section. And they're all high passed. I use FabFilter Pro Q, like pretty much every other producer out there, because it's awesome. I route all of my percussion to one bus and just slap a nice high pass filter on it, usually somewhere between 500 and 800. And yeah, that pretty much takes care of that. You know, by high passing it, it's not cutting into your basses or your other drums or your synths and stuff like that. And one thing I do with percussion is I put a stereo enhancer on it, or any other stereo panning tool you know of, and I just widen the crap out of it. because you generally want to keep your sounds like an upside down pyramid. Down below in the center, like you have your subs. Then you have widening out a little bit. You have your kicks and your drums, your basses, synths, percussion. So as you go up in frequency, you want to widen in the stereo field. It's one thing that really took my productions further. One thing that can really liven up a mix is background white noise. Sometimes when you're listening to your track and working on it for a while and it just sounds a little bit bare and you don't really know what's missing, because you can have percussion filling out the higher end frequencies, but you just don't know, there's just something sparkly that's missing. Just can barely hear it, but it can really help a mix out, give it a little bit of flair that might be missing.
You mean use it like in build-ups and stuff, or just?
Mainly during drop sections.
But just like a constant.
Yeah, constant white noise. I use constant white noise in my drop sections. You can sidechain it to your drums, or synths, or anything else really. I mean, white noise, because it's so background, you can just play around with it in a million different ways, and you can see what works for you. You can sample anything. Something that you might not think would work as a sample might work as a sample. I took this sample from...
People say things like, intelligence is no match for a gun, as if guns had grown on trees.
The robot effect and the delay was mine, but the talk itself, the sample itself, is from a talk given at Stanford. Some guy at a podium.
TED Talk?
Not a TED Talk, but it was at the Singularity Summit, which is a bunch of people getting together and talking about the technological singularity and the exponential evolution of technology, stuff like that. But yeah, that was an academic talk given at Stanford, and I thought of it, and then I heard it, and I thought, damn, that'd be kind of cool. So I used it. And that was done with 2 camel fats. Camel fat is awesome on its own. It's even better when you use 2.
What, on the same channel? Stack them on top of each other?
Exactly. Stack them up, and you'll never know what you can find. So I have distortion from both, but the MM filter on one, and the comb. The comb is the secret ingredient there, because without the comb, you can hear it like...
People say things like, intelligence is no match for a gun, as if guns had grown on trees.
So it sounds pretty, similar all throughout, but then once you throw the comb on there...
People say things like, intelligence is no match...
Like biting metal teeth. I love it. One thing that really made this track stand out while I was making it was that I used this guy that I'm pulling up right here. Fab Filter Saturn. It's a saturation plugin. It's incredible for tightening up drums. Like, your drums can sound really chunky or just really thin, and if you saturate them, it just sounds really nice. Here's what the snare sounds like with no saturation. Punchy, but a little too shimmery. Now here's with the saturation. One plugin that's ubiquitous whenever I make bass sounds, and I love its name, I love what it looks like, is the Sausage Fattener. This was made by the 2 guys in Dada Life, and even though they make house music, it's applicable pretty much anywhere on anything, because it's just awesome. It's 3 knobs, a gain, a fatness, and a color. And it's just great, and I love how the sausage changes as you tweak the fatness. It gets really angry, and then it can just become really chill. But most often I use Massive, Diva, Silent 1, Camel Fat, and just recently I started using Isotope Alloy 2. That stuff is great for drum processing. For mastering, I normally just export the entire mix by itself, and then I'll use Isotope Ozone 5, and usually I'll start with a preset and try and tweak one. Other times I'll just start with all the units off and just add as I like. Normally the first one that I start out with is the equalizer, because it's first in the chain, and normally you want to just EQ it a little bit before you do anything else to it, because the EQ is just bare frequency manipulation. So one thing that I find lacking a lot is the high end. So if you notice over here on this point right here, I put a high shelf about 3.5 dB, so it's pretty drastic. I did that at 7 kilohertz about. So it really brings out the highs, the high end shimmer, the things that make you put your hands up in a club. After that, sometimes I'll use the harmonic exciter. I didn't use it on this track, but it's really good for helping elements to cut through the mix. You know, it can really make it sound good. It can make a track from sounding dull to sounding really exciting. Dynamics, I don't do too much on this. You know, I like to use all 4 bands, but I don't really do too much to each one. Yeah, the thing that I love most about Ozone is the maximizer, because it really brings out the dynamics and it makes it really loud and fat. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't do much mastering wise, because if you start with a good mix down, you normally don't have to do much mastering wise, and if you start with a bad mix down, no matter how much mastering you do, it's never going to end up well, because you can't polish a turd. That's an old adage that you hear in the music industry. If you want to hear this track finished, it's available for free download on my SoundCloud at www.soundcloud.com/SoularDJ.